Silk may appear to be nothing more than a beautiful piece of fabric, but its influence reaches far beyond clothing. For thousands of years, silk functioned as money, marked the boundaries between social classes, financed governments, inspired international trade, and connected civilizations separated by thousands of miles. Chinese silk became so valuable that merchants carried it across deserts, mountain passes, and dangerous frontiers. It fascinated Roman aristocrats, enriched Chinese dynasties, and helped create the vast network of routes that we now call the Silk Road. Eventually, the global search for direct access to Eastern luxuries would even encourage European explorers to cross the oceans. Yet the story of this world-changing material begins with a surprisingly small event, a cocoon falling into a cup of tea. According to ancient Chinese legend, silk was discovered around 2700 BC by Empress Leizu, the wife of the legendary Yellow Emperor. One day, Leizu was drinking tea beneath a white mulberry tree when a cocoon fell from the branches into her steaming cup. The hot water softened the natural substance holding the cocoon together. When the Empress attempted to remove it, a delicate, shining thread began to unwind. She continued pulling and discovered that the thread was extraordinarily long, smooth, and strong. Fascinated by the material, Leizu supposedly began experimenting with ways to unwind the fibers, combine them into stronger strands, and weave them into cloth. Although historians cannot confirm every detail of this legend, Leizu became remembered in Chinese tradition as the silkworm mother and the founder of silk production. Silk production required far more than simply collecting cocoons from trees. It depended on a complicated and highly controlled process called sericulture. The process began with the eggs of the Bombyx mori moth. After hatching, the silkworm larvae were fed enormous quantities of fresh mulberry leaves. Their environment had to be kept clean and protected from sudden changes in temperature, oils, disease, and predators. When fully grown, each larva released a fine protein fiber from glands near its mouth. It wrapped this fiber around itself thousands of times, gradually creating a protective cocoon. To recover the silk without breaking it, workers softened the cocoon in hot water and carefully located the end of the fiber. Several fibers were then reeled together to create a stronger thread. The process demanded patience, skill, and a large workforce, helping explain why high-quality silk became so valuable. After discovering how to produce silk, Chinese rulers understood that the process was an extremely valuable form of knowledge. Foreign merchants could purchase the finished fabric, but they were not supposed to learn how it was made. The methods of raising silkworms, cultivating mulberry trees, unwinding cocoons, and weaving the fibers were treated as closely guarded secrets. Chinese dynasties imposed strict controls on silk production and attempted to prevent silkworm eggs, living larvae, and specialized knowledge from leaving the empire. Traditional accounts describe severe punishments for anyone who revealed the process to foreigners. This secrecy allowed China to maintain a powerful commercial advantage. Other civilizations desired silk, but they could not easily produce it themselves. By controlling both the knowledge and the supply, China protected one of the ancient world's most profitable monopolies. Every foreign demand for silk brought wealth back toward the Chinese imperial economy. Within China, silk rapidly became much more than an attractive material for making clothes. It was closely connected to imperial authority, government service, religious ceremony, diplomacy, art, and social identity. Emperors wore elaborate silk robes decorated with symbols of political and cosmic power. Officials displayed their positions through carefully regulated colors, patterns, and styles. Silk banners appeared during ceremonies, military processions, and religious rituals. Bolts of fabric were presented as diplomatic gifts to foreign rulers and distributed as rewards to soldiers or government servants. Because silk was difficult to produce and required specialized labor, possessing it immediately communicated wealth and influence. The fabric became a visible language of social rank. A person's clothing could reveal whether they belonged to the imperial household, served in the government, commanded an army, or occupied a lower position in society. In this way, silk helped make China's social hierarchy visible. In ancient China, silk was not merely something people purchased with money. Silk itself could function as money. The fabric was valuable, relatively lightweight, easy to transport, and widely desired. It could also be measured and divided into standardized lengths, making it useful for taxation, payment, and trade. For centuries, Chinese households could pay part of their taxes in grain and rolls of silk. During the Han Dynasty, government officials and soldiers might receive fabric as part of their salaries or official rewards. The state could collect silk from the population, store it in government warehouses, and later use it to purchase supplies, finance military campaigns, reward loyal service, or conduct diplomacy with neighboring peoples. Silk was especially useful beyond China's borders. Foreign communities that had little interest in Chinese coins still valued the fabric. This made silk a kind of international currency, one that could cross political and cultural boundaries more easily than official metal money. Because clothing made wealth and status immediately visible, Chinese governments developed laws controlling who could wear particular types of silk. The finest fabrics, complex decorations, and prestigious colors were normally reserved for the imperial household and the highest-ranking officials. Yellow, especially in later imperial tradition, became closely associated with the emperor and his unique position at the center of the political order. Government officials wore robes that indicated their administrative rank. Certain designs, colors, and accessories could identify the office a person held and the degree of authority they possessed. Common people were expected to dress according to their social position. In some periods and regions, peasants were restricted from wearing expensive silk, even when their own households participated in producing it. These rules were not simply about fashion. They reinforced hierarchy. By controlling clothing, the state transformed silk into a visible reminder that society was divided into different levels, each with its own privileges and responsibilities. In 138 BC, Han Emperor Wu sent an official named Zhang Qin on a dangerous diplomatic mission into Central Asia. The Han government was searching for allies against the Kishinev, a powerful confederation that controlled territory along China's northern and western frontiers. Zhang Qin was ordered to contact the Eurasia people and persuade them to join an anti-Kishinev alliance. The mission did not unfold as planned. Zhang Qin was captured and held for years before escaping and continuing westward. During his long absence, he encountered unfamiliar peoples, kingdoms, cities, products, and trade networks. Although he failed to secure the alliance, Zhang Qin returned with something almost as valuable: detailed information about the world beyond China's western frontier. He described powerful horses from Central Asia, prosperous agricultural regions, established commercial routes, and distant markets that valued Chinese products, especially silk. His reports encouraged the Han government to expand its western contacts. The information brought back by Zhang Qin helped strengthen China's connections with Central Asia. Over time, a vast network of commercial routes developed between the Han Empire and regions much farther west. Today, we call this network the Silk Road, although it was never a single continuous highway. It consisted of many overlapping trails, mountain passages, desert routes, river valleys, oasis towns, and local marketplaces. The routes began near cities such as Chang'an, the Han capital, and passed through the narrow Hexi corridor toward the dangerous deserts of western China. From there, different branches continued through Central Asia, Persia, Mesopotamia, and eventually toward the Mediterranean world. Very few merchants traveled the entire distance. Instead, goods were exchanged. A Chinese merchant might sell silk to a Central Asian trader, who sold it to a Persian merchant, who passed it to another dealer farther west. The Silk Road was therefore less like a single journey and more like an enormous relay system connecting many civilizations. The journey from China to the Mediterranean covered thousands of miles and passed through some of the world's most difficult environments. Caravans crossed dry deserts where water sources were separated by days of travel. They moved through narrow mountain passes, unstable borderlands, and territories controlled by different kingdoms, tribes, and local authorities. At each stage of the journey, merchants had to pay for animals, food, guides, protection, accommodation, taxes, and customs. Every trader also added a profit before selling the silk to the next buyer. As a result, the fabric became more expensive each time it changed hands. A roll of silk that began its journey in China might pass through numerous merchants before appearing in a Persian market or Mediterranean port. By the time the finest Chinese silk reached the Roman world, it had become an extraordinary symbol of wealth. Ancient writers compared its value to gold, while Roman elites competed to obtain the most delicate and luxurious example. As trade networks expanded across Central Asia and the Middle East, Chinese silk eventually reached the Roman world. Roman buyers had seen linen and wool, but silk seemed unlike any material they had encountered before. It was light, smooth, brilliantly colored, and capable of producing clothing that appeared to shimmer as the wearer moved. The fabric's distant origins made it even more attractive. Romans associated silk with an almost mythical Eastern people called the Seers, a name connected with the land from which the mysterious textile arrived. Most Roman consumers had no direct contact with China, Their silk passed through many intermediaries, including Central Asian, Persian, and Middle Eastern merchants. This distance added to the mystery. The Romans knew that silk came from somewhere far to the east, but they had little accurate knowledge of the people who produced it or the remarkable process involving silkworms, mulberry leaves, cocoons, hot water, and careful reeling. Roman aristocrats quickly transformed silk into one of the most powerful symbols of luxury in the empire. The wealthy did not purchase it simply because it was comfortable. They wore it because it was rare, expensive, foreign, and instantly recognizable. A flowing silk garment announced that its owner possessed the money and connections required to obtain goods from the farthest edges of the known world. Silk became particularly popular among aristocratic women, whose garments could be dyed in brilliant colors and woven so thinly that Roman writers described them as nearly transparent. Members of imperial families, wealthy senators, and successful merchants used silk to compete with one another in public displays of status. At banquets, religious festivals, theaters, and political ceremonies, clothing became part of the performance of power. The more difficult the silk was to obtain, the more desirable it became. Its extreme cost was not a disadvantage. For Roman elites, the price was part of its appeal. Not everyone in Rome celebrated the arrival of silk. Conservative politicians, philosophers, and moral writers believed the fabric represented everything that was going wrong with Roman society. To them, silk was not merely expensive clothing. It was evidence of greed, vanity, sexual immodesty, and dependence on foreign luxury. The transparent quality of some silk garments caused particular outrage. Critics claimed that respectable Roman women should not wear clothing that revealed the outline of the body. Others feared that Roman citizens were abandoning the values of simplicity, discipline, and military strength that had supposedly built the Republic and the Empire. Foreign luxury became a convenient target. Writers could blame silk, perfume, spices, jewelry, and elaborate banquets for weakening Roman character. The debate revealed a deeper tension within Roman society. Rome's military victories had brought enormous wealth, but that wealth encouraged forms of consumption that many leaders viewed as dangerous. One of the most famous Roman critics of luxury was Pliny the Elder, a scholar, naval commander, and author of the enormous encyclopedia known as Natural History. Writing in the 1st century AD, Pliny complained that Rome was sending vast amounts of wealth to India, Arabia, and the distant lands of the East in exchange for luxury products. He estimated that approximately 100 million sesterces left the Roman economy each year to satisfy the demand for silk, spices, perfume, precious stones, and other exotic goods. Ancient economic statistics are difficult to verify, but Pliny's complaint reveals genuine Roman anxiety. Imported luxuries were purchased with gold and silver, while the products themselves were eventually worn, burned, eaten, or consumed. To Pliny, this exchange appeared deeply unequal. Rome surrendered permanent wealth for temporary pleasure. Silk therefore became part of a larger argument about trade, morality, and whether an empire could be weakened by the desires of its own wealthy citizens. Although Roman elites spent fortunes on silk, many of them had no idea that the fabric came from insects. Some writers believed that the people of the East collected fine fibers from leaves or combed a soft substance from special trees. Others described silk as if it grew naturally in forests, much like cotton. This confusion was understandable. China was separated from Rome by thousands of miles, deserts, mountains, empires, and trading communities. Very few individuals traveled the entire route, so information moved in fragments. A merchant in the Mediterranean might purchase silk from a Persian trader, who had obtained it from a Central Asian dealer, who had purchased it from someone closer to China. At every stage, details could be lost, distorted, or deliberately concealed. The finished cloth offered no obvious clue that it began with a small larva feeding on mulberry leaves. As a result, silk arrived in Rome centuries before accurate knowledge of sericulture did. China successfully protected the secrets of sericulture for an extraordinary length of time, but no monopoly can remain completely secure forever. Traditional stories describe a Chinese princess who married a ruler in the Oasis kingdom of cotton. Unwilling to live without silk, she supposedly concealed silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds in her clothing or elaborate hairstyle. Other knowledge may have spread gradually through Central Asian trade and migration. The most famous story in the West concerns the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. During the 6th century AD, monks who had traveled in Asia allegedly returned carrying silkworm eggs hidden inside hollow bamboo staffs. Whether every detail of these stories is accurate is uncertain, but the broader process is clear. By late antiquity and the early medieval period, silk production had begun outside China. The Chinese monopoly weakened, yet Chinese silk remained famous for its quality, craftsmanship, and cultural prestige. Silk continued to influence global history long after the Roman Empire declined. During the late medieval period, European demand for Asian goods remained extremely strong. Silk, spices, porcelain, precious stones, and perfumes reached Europe through complex trade systems involving Asian, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean merchants. Each intermediary increased the cost. Political conflicts, taxes, piracy, and changes in regional power could also interrupt the flow of goods. European rulers and merchants therefore dreamed of reaching Asian markets more directly by sea. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic. He believed he could reach the islands and trading regions of Asia by crossing the ocean rather than traveling around Africa. Columbus did not find the route he expected, but his voyage permanently connected Europe and the Americas. The Age of Discovery had many causes, including religious ambition, political competition, and technological development. Yet the desire for direct access to Eastern luxuries, especially silk and spices, was one of its most powerful economic motivations. Silk continued to influence global history long after the Roman Empire declined. During the late medieval period, European demand for Asian goods remained extremely strong. Silk, spices, porcelain, precious stones, and perfumes reached Europe through complex trade systems involving Asian, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean merchants. Each intermediary increased the cost. Political conflicts, taxes, piracy, and changes in regional power could also interrupt the flow of goods. European rulers and merchants therefore dreamed of reaching Asian markets more directly by sea. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic. He believed he could reach the islands and trading regions of Asia by crossing the ocean rather than traveling around Africa. Columbus did not find the route he expected, but his voyage permanently connected Europe and the Americas. The Age of Discovery had many causes, including religious ambition, political competition, and technological development. Yet the desire for direct access to Eastern luxuries, especially silk and spices, was one of its most powerful economic motivations. Silk's importance extended far beyond clothing and international trade. Its smooth surface made it an excellent material for writing, painting, and mapmaking. A brush could move easily across the fabric, allowing scholars and artists to create detailed characters, diagrams, and illustrations. Silk scrolls were lightweight, flexible, and durable. They could be rolled for storage and transported more easily than heavier wooden or bamboo writing materials. The major disadvantage was cost. Producing a large sheet of silk required enormous labor, so it was normally reserved for wealthy scholars, government officials, royal courts, or documents considered especially important. Silk was also used for practical purposes. Its fibers were strong enough to make fishing lines, bowstrings, and strings for musical instruments. It could be embroidered into ceremonial images or transformed into banners carried during political and religious events. The same material that created luxury clothing could therefore transmit music, art, administration, and knowledge. In 1973, archaeologists excavating the Mawangdui tomb complex near Changsha made one of the most important discoveries in the study of ancient China. Inside tomb number 3, they found a collection of manuscripts written on silk and buried during the early Han Dynasty, around 168 BC. The texts included philosophical works, medical discussions, military writings, maps, astronomical observations, star charts, and diagrams related to physical exercise and health. Some manuscripts preserved versions of famous Chinese works that differed from later copies, giving historians a rare opportunity to study how ideas changed over time. The durability of the silk, combined with the protected environment of the tomb, allowed this knowledge to survive for more than 2,000 years. The discovery captures the extraordinary history of silk in a single image. The material began as a cocoon spun by a tiny silkworm. It became clothing, currency, political power, international commerce, and a vehicle for ideas. Silk stitched together the ancient world and then preserved part of that world for us to rediscover.